It's the Vancouver Hockey Show, another edition of the VHS. Andrew Wadden, producer Aaron, here with you as we rewind the week for the Vancouver Canucks and then take a look at some of the juicier storylines around the team. And of course, a big one this week centered around Elias Pettersson. Aaron, did you hear about that, by the way?
Something happened. Something got done.
8 more years, $92.8 million. So Elias Pettersson and his family down the line, and then down the line from there, and possibly down the line from there, are all set up for the rest of their lives. But we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's press rewind and go over the week. An interesting week for the Vancouver Canucks. They go 1-1-1. And it kicked off on Tuesday with the 4-3 overtime loss to the Penguins. Then, still at home, a 5-1 loss. To the LA Kings. And then as we record this is essentially a post-game show because the Canucks just won a 2-1 affair over the Anaheim Ducks that kicked off a 3-game road trip. So let's start all the way back to Tuesday. Sid the Kid in town, which is always a great time. Anytime Sid the Kid's in town, of course, we have to reminisce about the 2010 golden goal. But it wasn't a golden night for the Vancouver Canucks whatsoever. They came off that, great game against the Bruins. They snapped the 4-game losing streak. They did it in style. They come back in the third. They win it in overtime. All right, the mojo's going again for the Canucks. No, sir. Pittsburgh Penguins had different plans. So for the first time this season, the Canucks
wait a minute. Say that again. The Pittsburgh Penguins had plans?
I said the Pittsburgh Penguins had different plans. There we go. A lot of P's there. So for the first time this season, they lose consecutive games at home. So, listen, that's a flattering stat if you're a Canuck fan, right? This one's not so much. They blow a 2-0 first period lead. I guess the Penguins too. Like the Penguins are not, the Penguins of 2016, 2017. Like this is just a middling team right now trying to make themselves a playoff spot. So the Canucks win the special teams battle, but they took 5 minor penalties in the game, and 4 of them were stick infractions. And we've heard Rick Tocchet go on and on about the stick infractions and how it's pissing him off. Continues to be a trend for the Canucks. So we move into Thursday, and they face off against the LA Kings. And I don't know about you, it's a bit of a no-show from the Canucks. Like LA is back to the old LA style, just sucking the life out of the game. But it's working for them right now. Like the Kings are on a roll. They're really creeping up the Pacific Division standings right now. As we record this, they are 1 point back of the Vegas Golden Knights for the 3rd spot in the Pacific. So something to keep an eye on there. Probably a team the Canucks don't want to see in the first round. Probably a team a lot of teams don't want to see in the first round. A team like that. If you remember the old Drew Doughty quote about the Canucks few years ago. And so that brings us to Sunday, the Anaheim Ducks, and the Canucks rebound. They get themselves back into the winning ways. Vasily Podkolzin gets recalled. It's the first time this year that we get a chance to see number 92. He slots in over Nils Aman. I am okay with that.
He's had a haircut since we last saw him, too.
Did you notice that as well? The first shot of him on the bench, that was the first thing I thought of. But back to him on there, his NHL days, they might be numbered. And don't get me wrong, like we're going to see Nils Aman play for the Vancouver Canucks again at some point this season. But, with the trade deadline coming at the end of the week, Canucks perhaps looking to strengthen the forward group. If I'm Nils Aman, and look at myself in the mirror right now. But regardless, get back to the game, which was pretty low event. Yeah. Canucks, I think they doubled them in shots. Didn't really matter.
Huge swaths of the game, no whistles.
Yeah, exactly. Big stretches of that game. Love the fact that Hoagie, or the Hog, scored himself his 19th of the season. Gotta love that. But again, not a Picasso whatsoever, but a very big 2 points for the Canucks. So they find themselves now atop the West in terms of points as we record this. But after what we saw over the last little while, still a lot to be worried about with this Canucks team as they head into what is going to be a very tough week. Before we get into that very tough week that is ahead, though, let's dig into some of the meatier topics that happened over the past week. And like we said right off the start of the pod, Elias Pettersson, 8-year deal. And Aaron, what a week.
Yeah.
What a change over this week. Like, here we are, a week ago, and the Canucks are celebrating the fact that they snapped that losing skid. It was a big game against the Bruins, always a big win over Boston, the fashion that they did it in. But, everybody's sort of picking at Elias Pettersson. Then all of a sudden, just boom, all of a sudden the extension talks and how it's heating up. Frank Saravalli being the one to light the fire, saying that there's been significant talk. And then a couple days later, and I believe you and I, sort of predicted when it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm, because you were going out of town on a little snowboarding trip.
Yeah.
So, which usually happens. Canucks news drops usually.
It doesn't snow all season. And then it just starts dumping on the North Shore and up in Whistler. And I'm like, oh my God, do not announce the Pettersson deal. I haven't ridden Whistler all season. I got a 5-day edge card. I got to use this thing up. Anyway, it's not about me. I know. But they end up announcing it on Saturday, which is, listen, if you're a Canucks fan, and you are if you're listening to this podcast.
But it was a 9:30 on a Saturday.
It's Canucks.
They wanted to get it done.
I woke up in the morning and, I was pretty bagged after a couple of days of just shredding the gnar, brah. But wake up in the morning and look at the phone, like, yep, that makes sense. So they do the announcement, and, as I mentioned, it's an 8-year deal. It's $92.8 million. It's just literally a hair above what William Nylander signed in Toronto, and makes sense to me. The fact that the Canucks got it done for under $12 million on the AAV, in my opinion, is massive.
That's a big win. It's
such a big win, Aaron, because as the cap rises over these next several years here, that PD's under contract, the contract 11.6 is going to look very nice in 2 to 3 years. Very nice. But you look at the Canucks down the middle, and obviously they're strong. You got PD there, you got JT Miller. Right now, of course, you got Elias Lindholm as well. We'll see what the future holds for him in Vancouver. But if you just look at it in terms of tandems, that's $19.6 million for Miller and PD for the next 6 years. Now, we know where Miller is in terms of his age, and the next 3 years you would think would be great with Miller, and then the 3 years
especially
after
with
that.
what he's doing this season. So,
dude, it's full value right now. Full value for Miller. But let's stick on PD though. I mean, just the fact that the tandem's 19.6 for 6 more years, and let's say 4 of those are elite years for Miller and 2 are just down. So be it. But the window is right now. And when you look at that value, let's do some comparisons. Look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Matthews and Tavares, $24 million right now. And Tavares is essentially what Miller we project to be in 3 to 4 years. So you're not getting the full value from Tavares right now, from his side of the coin. And then the Oilers and McDavid and Draisaitl at $21 million. Now, Draisaitl can re-up, I believe, after next season, and I think it's 2 more for McDavid. And so you can assume that that's going to be way higher, substantially higher, but 28 million, 26 million, maybe at the low end. Could they even keep them together, the Oilers? That's the question. But again, that's what the point I'm getting at here. 19.6 million for your 2 center down the middle. That is an absolute win for the Canucks. Maybe it's just for about 4 years until Miller maybe sort of starts to get onto the back 9. But that is a substantial win for Rutherford. And it's just another W for those guys. All they do is win, Aaron. Now let's see if they can do that on the ice in the playoffs. But right now, when it comes to, trades and extensions, they're getting it done. We'll see what they can do with Filip Hronek, but Elias Pettersson is the most important player on this team, and they got him done for 8 more years at what is going to be an unbelievable ticket moving forward. Look at the value they're getting from Miller, like we talked about, but look at the value they're getting from Quinn Hughes on the ticket that he's on as well. Mm-hmm. Look at the value they're getting from Thatcher Demko on the ticket that he's on as well. Thatcher Demko's worth double the value that he gets paid right now. And arguably, you could probably get a third of that more for Quinn Hughes. The Quinn Hughes should be a double-digit player, but he's not. So can the Canucks, strike while the iron's hot, as they say, while these players are on these great tickets? We'll see. But Elias Pettersson, 8 more years at 11.6 on an AAV is an unbelievable piece of business by Rutherford.
And I can't wait to see what Rutherford does wheeling and dealing in the offseason here. Because now there's room to play.
Let's get to the deadline in just a moment, though, because I want to just get through a few things that, sort of from last week. The Mikheyev drought, I keep going on and on about it.
What a huge chance in that Ducks game.
Just don't even. He had 2. Oh. He had 2 in that game. He can't convert. I'm sorry. He just can't get it done. I'm so done with Ilya Mikheyev. 31 games. Like, is there a trade partner out there for Mikheyev? Would anybody be willing to take on that contract? Is there anybody out there that thinks, you know what? Maybe that guy could do something for us? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. Would the Canucks eat a portion of his salary in a trade? Again, I doubt it.
It depends who's coming back the other way. Who knows? But
how about this? We saw him tonight. Frank Vatrano. They're the same age. Vatrano's a year older. He'll be 30 in 10 days from now, actually, 11 days from now. Now he makes 3.65, so he makes $1 million less than Mikheyev. And, he's got 29 goals this year. So he's having a better season than Mikheyev. Kills penalties as well. Now he kills penalties on the Ducks. So they're pretty thin in that department. To me, if you were going to make that trade, or if, the Ducks would be interested in that, one, the Ducks are always going to be interested in somebody with money because they're on the floor anyway when it comes to the cap, right? They'll take on guys if you can sweeten it up, though. So would the Canucks be willing to sweeten that deal somehow? Perhaps it's a prospect. They don't have a whole lot of draft picks to really be dealing with anymore, do the Vancouver Canucks. But they do have a few prospects. And as I look at their on Cap Friendly, the draft picks, they're going to have to be careful with what they do with draft picks from this point moving forward. But maybe there's a piece down, in Abbotsford. Maybe there's a piece that they have in their prospect system that Anaheim would like. Again, you're getting term with Vatrano as well. You'll get him for 1 more year after this. And the Ducks would get Mikheyev for 2 more years. So, the Ducks would have to really like Mikheyev, but at the same time, too, even if they did like him, they're not going to bluff. They know that the Canucks would be, weak in this negotiation, in this deal. Could they pry one of their prospects out of them? No, it's not going to be somebody like Lekaramaki. It's not going to be, it's just not going to be anybody the Canucks like at all. Arthur Seeloff, Villander, someone like that. It's not going to be. But, could you dangle, the EP defenseman, Elias Pettersson defenseman? I don't know these prospects well enough, especially guys like Elias Pettersson, to, understand what maybe others might think of them. Atu Ratu, is that a guy that somebody might be interested in? Perhaps. I don't know. But is there a prospect that the Canucks could package, to maybe get the interest of the Anaheim Ducks? Who knows? But right now, the way Ilya Mikheyev is playing, the Canucks have to figure it out. Now, maybe it might be something that they have to do in the offseason, and maybe it might be best to do in the offseason because he does, fill a role when it comes to penalty killing. But the value that you're not getting from that contract right now for Ilya Mikheyev is just continues to grow each and every game. And 31 games. Aaron, does he make it half a season? Does he go 41 games without scoring? We're 10 away. We should track that.
Yeah.
We got to track that.
We got to do like one of those charity thermometers,
Yes, exactly. Or like
it's going to blow, man, when it hits 41.
Yeah, exactly. But those are usually, you've reached your goal at that point. You're excited about it, no?
Well, no, this is the volcano erupting,
All right. Again, if I'm Ilya Mikheyev, and I know he's gripping the stick tight, they had a couple of close-ups on him tonight, and you can see it's got to be tough. You know it. like as the player, and you play
especially when half the net was wide open for you.
It's just there's no finish, bro. There's no finish whatsoever. The defense coming and going right now. Tyler Myers is week to week with a lower body injury, but some good news though. Looks like Carson Soucy is likely to return on Tuesday in Los Angeles. We'll have to see about that, but he looks to be good to go. And this is a really good story because I can't stand head injuries when it comes to hockey players because it just, look at Tucker Poolman, for instance. Like we don't even know Tucker Poolman here in Vancouver. And, he's been battling head injuries throughout his entire career. Guillaume Brisebois gets one in the preseason. And now he's back skating in an on-contact jersey, seen at practice on Saturday. So good luck to Guillaume Brisebois. Here's a guy that just seems to be, it just seems like he's been in the system forever. Of course, our buddy Botch, rest in peace with the Brisebois. But good to see him back on the ice and hoping the best for Brisebois and hoping to see him return to the ice very soon. Okay, before we put a bow on this show, let's get to this week. Big week for the Canucks. Trade deadline on Friday. But not only that, it's a massive gauntlet that they got to run now. So they get the dub against the Ducks, which, they kind of eked it out with a 2-1 victory. Regardless, doesn't matter. They got the 2 points. Tuesday at LA, Thursday in Vegas, and then they return home Saturday against the Jets. They are combined 0-3 this season against those 3 teams. So 3 real big games for the Canucks. They might look different though on Saturday. They might have a couple of new nice shiny toys in the lineup on Saturday against the Winnipeg Jets. But first, you got to get through LA and you got to get through Vegas, Aaron, and the Kings and the Golden Knights. Golden Knights are kind of beat up right now, stumbling just a little bit. But the Kings, hot on their heels. I don't know if you've been watching them lately. They are a team that is not to be trifled with right now. Don't have fantastic goaltending, but I do love that forward group. And you saw the way that they suffocated the Canucks last Thursday. I don't know. That's just a team right now that I just don't want to see. Be real interesting to see how the Canucks match up with them on Tuesday night. Trade deadline now. All right. Now we talked about the Vatrano possibility with the Canucks. I don't know. Feels like I'm just throwing that one out there. Feels like a lot of teams might be after Frank Vatrano right now. Teams like guys with term on their deals as well. Right? You get 2 playoff runs out of them, or perhaps if you stumble the next year, then you end up flipping them at the deadline yourself. To me, Aaron, I think the Canucks need but 2 pieces right now. They need a top 6-ish forward. And some might say, hey, they got Phil Kessel training down in Abbotsford. Maybe Phil Kessel from 5 or 6 years ago, sure. But in reality, I feel like they need that top 6, 9-ish forward. That's why I threw out a name like Vatrano. A lot of people might say it's Jake Gensel. At that point, you're looking at, probably a first-round pick going out the door. And maybe one of your better prospects that you don't want to move. I think they need a depth defenseman as well. And I think they need someone along the lines of what the Leafs did with Lyubushkin out of Arizona. If you can do one of those crafty deals where you end up picking up a guy who's, third pair, depth guy, just somebody to add to the mix so that you've got a whole bunch of depth on defense going into the postseason. And you try to do it with, another team taking on a share of the salary, like one of those crafty deals. Like the Leafs are paying less than league minimum for Lyubushkin. So it's a nice piece of business from them. But, he's a third pair guy. He's, one of those guys that will block a ton of shots. He'll eat a few minuses, but at the same time too, like he's, warrior type. I think that's what the Canucks need. Love what we've seen from Juleson. Love what we saw from Juleson against the Ducks, by the way, in a game that was a low event game as well. Like he had a few good hits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And his to hit properly in the NHL, especially nowadays when, the league is very sensitive about, where you hit the player, especially in the head area, to time things up properly is an absolute like skill and weapon. Juulsen's got it. And I think they need a type of player like Juulsen, like just another one of those guys, and let that, last spot on the blue line be a battle. Let the third pair be a battle, if you will. Ian Cole's probably going to be solidified back there, but get somebody, that can add to this core that's not going to cost you a whole lot, And when the Canucks do have, or what they do have, that is, they do have some extra late round picks. They got 2 6 this year. So if you're going to do one of those retention sort of deals where you get a third party in and they take on a certain portion, you might have to give them a 6 from this year, or, maybe this next year's 5th or next year's 4th, something like that, right? Like just something you're not going to be overly worried about giving away. And, perhaps you can get back in a different deal. But that's what I feel the Canucks need. I think they need a top 6-ish, so a 9 to 6 forward and a depth defenseman. And at that point, I think if they get both of those, if they could get Jake Gensel, well, that's a different story. I don't think they're going to be shopping in that bin, but if they can get top 6-ish, 9 sort of forward, depth defenseman, I think they'll be all right with this trade deadline, and they won't do too much to suffocate the future. Okay, a reminder, we joined Patreon. And we're hoping to get you guys involved as well. As you know, you don't hear any ads right now, any sponsors with us. It's just us and you. So if you want to support the show, we would love that. Here's what you get with the Patreon membership. Just $5 a month. You get episodes a day early. And we're thinking about doing some post-game pods. We want to get the Patreon members involved. If we can get the community built up enough, then we'll do some post-game shows that are sort of exclusive to you. You can ask the questions. We'll get you guys involved. Of course, with the postseason coming up, we want to do these post-game pods. So we'd love to get a little community going over on our Patreon and get you guys involved. Of course, we'll do some exclusive content as well. And we really want to work on some merchandise because we do have some really cool designs that we've put together. We just want to make sure that we've got the means to be able to get the merchandise out to you guys. But joining our Patreon would help with all of that. Head over to Patreon, Vancouver Hockey Show, and join just $5 a month. All right, Aaron, big week here for the Canucks.
It is. Looking forward to it.
We're March now. Like we're out
the madness begins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. March Madness. And we're what, a month and a half away from playoff hockey starting, or at least the regular season ending and playoff hockey just around the corner. So this is going to be a good push, and it's going to be a real good push for the Canucks this week to see exactly what they got against the big boys of the West, because they have not fared well against the LAs, the Vegases, or the Winnipegs. And after that, too, bleeding into next week, you know who they got?
Who?
Colorado.
Oh,
doesn't get any easier for the Canucks. But I'll tell you what, I'll take all of those games over that whatever we watched against the Anaheim Ducks. All right, for producer Aaron, I'm Andrew Wadden. Thanks for listening, everyone.